This one right here is narrowleaf plantain because it has narrow leaves. It's also known as lance leaf plantain. It's at the end of the season, so the leaves are not spectacular. The plant doesn't look that great, but it's still a very useful medicinal. So lance leaf or Plantago lanceolata. And so this one is an introduced variety from Europe, and it's found all over the place, but it can be used. It sends up this stalk here when it goes to seed, this shoot here, and these can be used also. So right here we have some of our native plantain. It's a black seed plantain, or Plantago rugelii. So here it is. There's a patch of it here, and it's really a beautiful plant. Some identifying features: it grows in a basal rosette, meaning like kind of a flower looking thing close to the ground, growing close to the ground at the base. And then you look at these leaves here, it kind of looks like it would be a monocot because it has these parallel veins running up it. But if you look closely, you see there's veins in between there, so it's net veined. Plantain is actually a dicot. And also another identifying feature is here, if we break this open, you see these little stringy parts right there in between where the veins are. That's another identifying feature if you're curious about whether you have plantain or not. And Ashley is going to go ahead and talk about plantain. Is very useful herbal and medicinal, and that Plantago, that plantain part, comes from the word for foot, because this was known as white man's foot, is what the Indians called it, because it's found along the paths. It grows in some hardened, compacted soil. So if there's foot trails and you walk along there, a lot of times you'll see plantain popping up there. We have a trail that goes around our back pasture, and you know, we see plantain popping up there. And it's pretty common. It's a very common plant. There's about I believe there's 3 genera now for it, and about 270 species. It's found on 6 continents, everywhere except Antarctica. You're bound to find some plantain wherever you are, at least one of the species. But this one right here, you should see also in Oklahoma. This is our native plantain.
So yeah, this is a nice, healthy looking patch of plantain here. And it's a super useful plant. We call it the Swiss Army knife of plants because it covers all your bases pretty much. It's not necessarily going to be the very most potent tool for hi kitty, for every single ailment you have, but it can do a lot of different things. So we really like it. Some people call it nature's band-aid. It's anti bacterial, antimicrobial. It's mildly analgesic, and it is a mild styptic. So analgesic helps with pain. Styptic means it helps stop bleeding. So it can do those a little bit, and it's also a biofilm buster. So it helps with detoxifying. It's got a compound in it called allantoin, and that helps speed up skin cell proliferation. So that means that the cells actually grow more quickly because of it. It's kind of unique in that it's got a pretty good balance of tannins and mucilage. So that means that it both tightens the skin, but it also soothes and moisturizes it, which is a great combination in a plant that you're going to want to use for wounds and things like that. And it helps heal from the inside out, so it's pulling and tightening. So a lot of people that work with it, they might use it for stings or bites or burns or splinters or things like that, where you're pulling things out, you want to help clean things out. And there are a lot of different ways that you can work with plantain. Typically, you would make a poultice. Sometimes we make poultices just by chewing up a little bit and putting it directly on the wounds like that. That's called a spit poultice, which seems kind of gross until you do a little bit more research and you realize, oh, the enzymes in my mouth help my body to react better to this plant. And then also that because plantain is antimicrobial, it'll help with anything that might be in your mouth that you don't want to put on your wounds. If you're not comfortable with that, you can also just crush it and put it on your arm as a poultice. You can do compresses. You can use it to make a soak or a tea. So if you're working with it internally, that's another great way to work with it, because the same kinds of cells that line our, that are on our skin also line our digestive tract. So if you're thinking wounds on the skin can be helped by plantain, the same might be true of any kind of wound on the inside of us that might be like Crohn's or IBS or any of those kinds of things. It might be helpful for those situations. Let's see. Oh, and we typically, so you could also work with it as a tea if you're taking it internally. We typically don't work with it too much as a tincture, so that's putting it in alcohol. I feel like the constituents are better extracted by water, but if you needed to, you could. We do sometimes work with it as a lineament, which means we put the plant material in, well, we usually use rubbing alcohol, but you can use any alcohol, but you put it on topically. I found that kind of helps it penetrate the skin a little bit more. So yeah, this is plantain, and you should be able to find it, like Stuart was saying, everywhere in the world. It's extremely common. In Oklahoma, we have, this is one of our native plantains, Plantago rugelli. We also have Plantago bracteata and virginica, and I'm blanking on the other ones right now, but there's a number of them that are that are native. The lance leaf that Stuart talked about is not native, but also very common, and they can all be used interchangeably. Oh, one other thing, we didn't talk about the seeds. These guys, one reason I like to work with these ones though is the size of the leaves, and they tend to bloom a little bit later, so they stay nice and lush longer than some of the other species. But the flowers are on these spires like this, and then after they flower, they'll go to seed. Those seeds are used kind of like chia or flax. They're mucilaginous, so they kind of gum up when you mix them with water. And also, one species of plantain is used to make psyllium. So if you've ever had psyllium husk, like in Metamucil or anything like that, that actually comes from a specific species of plantain. So pretty cool. It's got a lot of uses, and that was just the very basics. You could keep working or studying this plant for a very long time and discover new things. So we hope you enjoy plantain and go find some in your yard.